As we left our hotel in Hanoi, a lady was on her way to sell her flowers. We enjoyed a walk round the lake in spite of the mist and drizzle, then stopped here for coffee and a view of the traffic until the exhaust fumes drove us away. Colourful shops lined our route back to the hotel, the La Siesta Trendy, where we met our fellow travellers Roger and Michelle and our guide Aaron. We didn't know what we expected to find in the ethnographic museum, but it was very interesting, with explanations in English, so we weren't left wondering what it was all about. Local guide Joe explained about some of the outdoor exhibits.
You see that? With the buffalo or the lizard or the birds or the chicken, whatever the thing. You know, generally we say one family. So man, that's like a...
We continued to the Temple of Literature, the first of many temples. After an enjoyable lunch at the Koto restaurant, we moved on to visit Ho Chi Minh's mausoleum. This is the presidential palace. Ho Chi Minh didn't live here, he had a modest bungalow nearby. The one-pillar pagoda. As usual, the pagoda housed food for the Buddha. Next on the itinerary was a walk in the old quarter and through a market, ending at a surviving city gate.
The very full day ended with a traditional water puppet show, which was good fun.
On Wednesday, we were up very early to tour the chaotic wholesale market.
And then try our hand, not very successfully, at Tai Chi.
After a breakfast of noodle soup and Vietnamese coffee, an experience we won't rush to repeat, we returned to the hotel for more familiar breakfast food. Later, we travelled to Tam Coc, site of Vietnam's first capital.
After lunch, we relaxed in a boat, while a very fit lady rowed us through the fields and caves in Van Long Nature Reserve.
Then we drove to our hotel, the hidden charm in Ninh Binh. This was the view from our window in the morning.
Later, we borrowed bicycles from the hotel and cycled through the rice fields with Joe and Aaron. To a nearby temple. Joyce went in the bus and said she enjoyed the walk back. Our ride wasn't without incident. The path was very muddy in places and we had to walk. Then Roger got a puncture, so Joe rang the hotel and a replacement bike was very efficiently brought to us. We returned past the river.
After an early breakfast, we drove to Hai Phong, where we boarded a Halong Bay cruise ship and set sail with lots of other ships for the fabled bay, where we stopped for the night. Michelle, Roger and Aaron went kayaking, but we stayed on board and took advantage of happy hour prices. Later, Roger overfilled his spring rolls with prawns. The following day, the ship cruised back to port by a different route through more rock formations. We would have liked to have seen the bay and the rocks looking magical in the sun, but seeing them mystical in the mist was still pretty good. We left the ship, and as the flight to Hoi An was delayed, we went to the ceramics village for an hour, then on to the airport for a flight and transfer to the Hoi An Central Hotel. In the evening, Aaron took us to the Morning Glory restaurant, where we enjoyed good food and company. Next day, we walked through the town with local guide Young, who pointed out the most historic buildings. In the evening, we returned to the Morning Glory. And the following morning, we walked back to the old town again for a few more pictures and an excellent cappuccino. Now we drove to Da Nang, passing lots of monument dealers and high-rise hotels on the way. We boarded the train to Hue and our next hotel. The flowers gave a false sense of luxury. The scenery was spectacular, but getting pictures was difficult. In Hue the following morning, we toured the imperial citadel, once home of the emperors. The citadel was badly damaged in the war, but is now much restored to its former glory. We then boarded cyclos for a tour of the area and a slightly worrying ride in the traffic. The ride ended at the market, which of course is just the same as all the other markets in Vietnam. Then we drove along the Perfume River to the multi-story Tin Mu Pagoda to end a busy morning. After lunch, we drove through the countryside to see the fantastic and extravagant tombs of some of the emperors who once lived in the citadel. Next morning, an early start was needed to get the next flight south to Saigon. We booked into the Silverland China Hotel and then went to see the War Remnants Museum.
Well, it's called the traffic jam in the city. They spent about 14 billion dong for this one, the new fountain.
After lunch, we walked around the city and then toured through the presidential palace, which was guarded by a lion dog. That evening, Aaron introduced us to another great restaurant, this one with DIY cooking. On the next day, we were left to entertain ourselves, and as it was very hot, we headed for the air-conditioned mall. Then we enjoyed a pleasant walk. In the evening, we enjoyed a meal here at the Other Place restaurant.
I'd like Aaron. I did offer. No, it's fine. That one's a little bit more comfortable.
Actually, I might wear that hat. Come on, let's get in there.
Yeah, okay.
Let's get in there.
Mấy tàu vừa đúng đồng nguy hiểm lắm.
On our last day, we went to the Mekong Delta and boarded these motorbike trucks to drive through the small lanes between the coconut palms. I don't think I really enjoyed it very much. The bikes took us to the river where we waited for our boat.
Like some boat here waiting for another room. Yeah. Yeah, only the canal. Yes. Later we back to the big river. Yeah.
Coconuts are the mainstay of the economy in the Mekong Delta, so we berthed at a coconut processing factory. Sadly, the tea ceremony lacked Japanese sophistication.
Green tea, hot green tea. That's very good.
A ride in a paddle sampan gave us a taste of life here in the past. We noticed that the ladies used outboard motors for their return journey. Next, the boat berthed at the Mango restaurant for lunch. And after lunch, we walked a short way to see this lady making rice paper.
Oh, very clever.
Yeah.
Like the poppadom.
Thank you.
That one, rice paper mixed with, and stop and leave it up. Yeah, and stop, leave it up. Yeah, yeah, okay.
Michelle tried her hand and made a good job of it.
Very good.
To end a great holiday, we returned for our last dinner in Saigon. Then we said goodbye to everyone and waited for the time to fly home.